Good evening. I'm sure a few more folks will be drifting in, but we'll go ahead and get started tonight. Ken Vickers, I'm a professor of history and chair of the social science division, and I would like to welcome you to tonight's very special big picture presentation. Lena tells her story, personal account of the integration of Martin Methodist College, or Martin College, at the time. Before we begin though, I would like to mention an upcoming big picture later this month on February 26th. At 7 o'clock here in the Golf Center. We'll have an evening with Larry Odom. Mr. Odom is the past chairman and CEO and president of Odom's Tennessee Fried Sausage. So he's also a member of the NMC Board of Trustees. Do mark that on your calendar. Tonight, though, the star of the show is Mrs. Lena Brown Prince. Do a little introduction to her, and then kind of set the stage, do the historical background for her presentation, or place her presentation in a historical context. Mrs. Prince is a native of Pulaski and a graduate of Bridgeforth High School. Briefly, before attending Martin College in August of 1963, she moved to Louisville, Kentucky to work for the Plymouth Settlement House, working with young women, which kind of sparked her interest in social work. In August of 1963, as she will tell you, she returned to Pulaski to attend Martin College. Upon graduating with her associates in 1965, she moved back to Louisville to attend the University of Louisville, working part-time, or attending school part-time, and working at the Plymouth Settlement House until she earned her degree in sociology, considered social work. To what she told me, she considered the salary for a social worker. And took a job working for the U.S. government at Fort Knox. She then worked for the VA Medical Center out of Louisville before moving to Chicago and taking a position with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, eventually working her way up to a labor relations specialist for HUD. She would later transfer to Nashville to get married, and continued to work for HUD until she took the position of the Army Corps of Engineers. She retired from the Corps in 1998. So, here's Lena Brown Prince. Now, by way of introduction. Now for the boring part. It's a little history lesson. To kind of set the background for what we're discussing as to what was so significant in August of 1963. Let's go back 2 centuries. 1896, with the landmark Supreme Court decision, Plessy versus Ferguson. Not to get into the particulars of Plessy versus Ferguson, but the Supreme Court will rule in 1896 in a kind of landmark decision for the forces of Jim Crow that segregation of the races was not discrimination as long as the separate facilities were equal. Ushering in the famous phrase, separate but equal, and the total segregation of the American South, to a degree beyond. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, created the Legal Defense and Education Fund and decided to go after segregation in the area of education. By the 1950s, Thurgood Marshall was the NAACP's lead attorney, and cases began to surface, questioning equality of schools. By 1954, challenges to Jim Crow segregation had risen from 5 different appellate courts, and the Supreme Court will hand down an omnibus decision. Cases range from Kansas, Delaware, South Carolina, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And on May 17, 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren handed down a unanimous joint ruling in these 5 cases, named after the first case, Brown versus Board of Education. As always, asks the freshmen students of Board of Education where? Kansas. The Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. That's not the South. Jim Crow had moved beyond the borders of the American South. In this unanimous decision, the court ruled that in the field, quote, in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. A year later, it becomes known as the Brown 2 decision. In 1955, the court called for the integration of schools at, quote, a prompt and reasonable start toward full compliance with all deliberate speed, end quote. Southern resistance was swift, and actually in Southern history referred to it as massive resistance. President Dwight Eisenhower himself did not act to enforce the Brown ruling until he was forced. In Arkansas, Little Rock, parents of 9 African American students obtained federal court orders for their children to attend Little Rock's Central High School in 1957. Governor Orville Faubus initially called up the Arkansas National Guard to prevent the order, and the Guard stood down in response to the court order. Because the governor of a former Confederate state that mobilized the National Guard to prevent, an attempt to prevent the carrying out of a federal court order, President Eisenhower placed the Guard on national duty and sent 1,000 paratroopers to Little Rock. They didn't parachute in, they came in the trucks. They were here by military base. But still, sent in 1,000 paratroopers to protect the students. This trend continues. In the area of higher education in 1962, Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett defied a court order allowing James Meredith to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Attorney General Robert Kennedy dispatched federal marshals to enforce the law, and then federal troops were dispatched to protect the federal marshals when they were attacked by mob action. By the time the riot was over, 2 people had been killed. Also famously, on June 11, 1963, Alabama Governor George Wallace symbolically stood in the doorway of the main administration building of the University of Alabama. Thus, the enrollment of Vivian Malone and James Hood. Stepped aside and presented federal court orders. In response to this third act of gubernatorial opposition to federal law, President John F. Kennedy addressed the nation on the evening of June the 11th and announced a push for national civil rights legislation. In the early morning hours of June 12th, he was returning home to Jackson. Medgar Evers, the end of the ACT Jackson, watching with his people a televised event speech by Kennedy, was assassinated by the iron of the battle. Against this backdrop, in August of 1963, here in Pulaski, so I was told one of my colleagues that I got a tenure track job on May 19, 2005, and they learned the awareness at Martin Methodist College, and supports that. Pulaski, Tennessee. Interesting thing about Pulaski's about a whole lot more than just the Ku Klux Klan, as tonight's talk will bring out. I'll also point out, when Martin College, and we're currently researching this to find out for sure, ran across one reference that said that we were the first private college in Tennessee to integrate. There now seems to be some evidence that we're maybe second or third, but we're still fairly high in that list. But in 1965, continue to sound the horn for Pulaski, the Giles County Board of Education became the first Board of Education in Tennessee to voluntarily integrate without a court order. We have a pioneer in our presence that helped facilitate this action. So without further ado, I'll get out of the way and give you Ms. Brown Prince.
Good evening to everyone. I thank you for coming to hear my story tonight. You will be quite surprised. I was born in Pulaski. I was born on Grigsby Street. When I was 2, we moved to a new home on the Lewisburg Highway, just beyond the city limits. A block house sits high up on the hill. I am number 10 of 10 children. Yes, it was fun growing up. By the time I came along, some of the older ones had already left home. But it was good. My mother died when I was 15 years old. So I would go to Louisville, where my mother's people lived, most of them, and my older siblings lived there as well. So I would travel back and forth during the summer, Christmas. We always did go back and forth until I graduated from high school in May of 1960. No one ever said anything about going to college. So while I was in Louisville, I worked a little bit part-time selling a house. And the first week I started, there was a speaker already in place to talk to the young ladies that I was going to be working with after school. And her name was Vivian Stanley. We became very close. As a matter of fact, she took me a lot of places with her, invited me to her home on the weekend. I got to know her family very well, and they actually became my family as well, my extended family. One day she said to me, "You've got to get into school." I said to her, "The last time I looked at my savings account, I didn't have enough money to go to school." She said, "I didn't ask you anything about any money." She said, "I'm going to have your other dad find you a scholarship." So I told my brother James that Mrs. Stanley and Mr. Stanley were going to find me a scholarship to go to college. And he said, "Well, why don't you just come back home and go to Martin?" I said, "Well, I'll think about that." I said, "Who's going to be paying? You or Daddy?" And he said, "I'm going to pay for it." I said, "Okay, I'll think about it." A few more weeks passed. Mrs. Stanley told me that your other daddy, has found you a scholarship, a 4-year ride. Oh, well, I called James, that's a big deal, you know. And he said, "No, you need to come home and go to school." I thought about it 2 or 3 weeks, and I couldn't understand why he wanted me to come home and go to Martin. I had no idea, and I still don't know to this day because he didn't tell me. But he had plans for me to go to Martin that I didn't know about. But I need to tell you a little bit about my brother so we all can understand him. His name was James Brown. He was a Navy veteran. He was a civil rights activist. He was a member of the NAACP. He was Tennessee Voters Council, chairman of the Tennessee Voters Council. And he was into everything that he could get into. He wanted to see Pulaski integrated. I don't know who he talked to, what he had planned. I don't know any of those. I never asked any questions. I was never concerned. Coming to March was just going back to school to me. I never thought of the possibility of incidents that were not good, or the possibility that I could have been injured. Never thought of any of those things. We lived on a hill. I knew nothing would happen up on the hill because my daddy wouldn't stand for that. But anyway, my brother went to all of the Democratic conventions. And he was a good friend of Avon Williams, Attorney Avon Williams in Nashville. And guess whose first cousin Avon has? Thurgood Marshall. Oh. And I know now there was a lot of correspondence, a lot of phone calls between them. But when James wanted to get something done, he had two very, very good attorneys on his side to answer all the questions he needed. Well, anyway, I came home, started school. I had to apply because I hadn't applied, but I applied and was accepted. Day one, I came to school. There were a few stairs. Obviously, nobody was expecting me. The students were not expecting me. So, up and down the halls and up and down the stairs, and someone see an African American, they'd stop and take a good look. But after a while, they all knew I was there, so everything calmed down. There was never, not ever, did I hear any nasty remarks, not once. After about a month, my dad and I were downtown, and it was a school afternoon, and it was hot, like the end of September, still hot down here. And my dad said, "Let's stop and get a coat." I said, "Okay." We went into this drugstore on the corner. It wasn't Reed's. We had two drugstores, and I can't remember the other drugstore's name. But we went into that drugstore, and we sat down. Now, I don't know where my daddy's mind was. I don't know where mine was either. But we sat down. The waitress came, took our order. We just wanted a Coke. So the owner came out. Of course, everybody knows my dad. And he says, "Now, John, we can't serve you." Well, I took over. I didn't even know I had that in me. I took over and I said, "Why can't you serve us?" I said, "You will either serve us now, or I'm going to school and bring my friends here, and you will serve us then." He made a quick decision to serve us. And that was the beginning of integration with the city of Pulaski. Well, I went everywhere the school went, everywhere the kids went. So, if we went bowling, I went. Nobody ever said anything. This almost sounds untrue, but it is. Nothing ever happened. One day, I told my sister-in-law that some of my friends from school were coming on Saturday afternoon. We're going to hang out and stay for dinner. I said, "So what are we going to have for dinner?" She was at the funeral home. She said, "We're going to have hot dogs." I said, "Hot dogs? You can't serve my friends hot dogs." She said, "Well, if they're hungry, they'll eat." She said, "Unless you've learned to cook." I don't know nothing about cooking, so anyway. Some of my very first friends were Judy, look, I have to figure out what their names are. And I saw one not long ago. I'm not going to tell you right now, but it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, we were out not every third, but we would go out on the third and fourth Sundays from the choir. I sang in the choir. We would go out to sing in other cities and counties in Tennessee at the Methodist Church. One Sunday afternoon. We were on our way home from wherever we sang that afternoon. And we stopped to have dinner. So I was kind of not last to get off the bus, but close to that. And the choir director asked the bus driver, "What would you like me to bring you back to eat?" Well, I happened to have heard it. And I said, "What do you mean? If he can't come in with us, then we'll all get on the bus and go to Pulaski and eat there." He went in, not a thing happened. They served everybody. You know, if they're going to serve me, they'll serve him too. So, you know, all of this, in thinking back, what could have happened, it didn't. And you know, I know now that God had a plan for me, and He took care of everything. I know that today. Well, what I do want you to know is Judy Burns was one of my very first friends. But what I want you to know is through those 2 years, nothing serious, nothing that's not even minute happened. And for that, I am proud of Martin, and you should be too. Well, getting close to graduation day, I decided to invite my sister-in-law's uncle, Uncle Calvin McKissick from Nashville, McKissick and McKissick Architect Company. He called my sister-in-law and told her he was coming. And said, "Who invited him?" I said, "I did." And she said, "Who's going to cook for him?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Whatever we eat, he'll eat." I didn't know he was a diabetic, so he can't eat what we eat. But anyway, he came. And after the graduation, we were back at the house, had somebody to fix the food. And he asked me, "Where are you going to finish your education?" And I told him, I said, "Well, they told me if I didn't go to school in Nashville, I was going to be on my own." He said, "Well, where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to the University of Louisville." I said, "So I guess I'll be on my own." But I want you to know that he was so proud of me, he gave me enough money. Not only I went to school part-time because I used the money, I needed a car. I needed a quiet place to study. So I bought a 5-room cottage, a new car, and went to school part-time. So I made him very proud of me. I know I did, before he died. But anyway, it was a pleasant experience. And only after I grew up and looked back at all of the things that did happen in other places, Pulaski, I am very proud of the way they reacted to the integration. Not only Martin, but to the city of Pulaski as well. Because I know the people who knew my brother, they knew that if anything had happened, he would have had everybody down here. But thank God he didn't. And I'm just, you know, I talk about Martin wherever I go because I'm very proud of it. And nobody can understand. You integrated down there in Pulaski? Yes, I did. And the next person is, what happened? Nothing. So I am happy to tell my story that it was just another day's journey. And that's as much as I have to say.
What we thought to do at this point is take a few questions. But I may start off, if I may. Looking through the yearbook in 64, 65, there were 5 or 6 additional African American students.
Yes.
Speak to that.
You know, I was surprised when I looked at the 65 yearbook that one of my cousins was here. And I'm sure she was here to talk to my brother. Certain of that. But anyway, we didn't, you know, it was a way, not much. I already had developed good friendship. So I hung around with those that I already knew.
So, your brother James sounds like a fascinating story.
It is.
Himself.
Yes, it is. It was just last week that I got an okay. Someone is doing a documentary on his life, so that will be coming.
That's good to know. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
Which buildings were here whenever you came to school? Which building did you go to class in?
We didn't have a lot of these buildings.
Right.
I don't remember which ones were here, but I know there are a lot of buildings like, I don't think this building was here. Okay.
Do you think if you didn't have your brother, the situation would have been different?
I know it would have been different. You know, it's kind of like you don't go on a trip and you don't know the road. You need a map, you need a phone, you need something. Yes.
There's a connection with Thurwood Marshall.
Yes.
Pretty safe.
Did you get the same welcome at University of Louisville what you did here?
Would you repeat that?
Did you get like the same welcome how everybody took you in here at the University of Louisville?
Did you receive the same love?
I did. You know, it was very few African Americans at at the University of Louisville. Actually, it was probably just about 10 of us there.
So, by the time you left here, almost as many students as well.
Yeah, 65 was, you know, that was early on.
I noticed from the slides that you soon had joined a club, but I was curious, what was your reaction your very first day of class? Were you timid or nervous?
No.
No.
No. It was just going to school again, you know. I don't understand why I wasn't. I don't understand why I wasn't nervous about the whole process, but I was.
But your dad was on the field.
That's a good one, Ed.
Brother James sounds formidable as well.
There were a couple questions or mentions of Plymouth House in Louisville. What is Plymouth House?
Plymouth Selden House. It was owned by the Christian church.
Okay, was it a home for kids?
No, we didn't know. Actually, they had recreation for the youth on the first floor. They had preschool on the second floor, and there was a dormitory for young ladies on the third floor.
What did you study while you were here?
Beg your pardon?
What did you study while you were here?
Well, my major always was sociology, so.
Were you learning about things that were going on in other parts of the South in your classes while you were here?
No.
While you were at Bridgeport High School, was that solely Bridgeport, or was that before Giles and Upton County, or was it also?
It was before. It was strictly Bridgeport.
What did you find you had in common with your classmates, and what are some things that maybe you help them to introduce to them that they may not know less about?
Well, we studied together. We were in the choir together. They went to my home, to my brother's house, so it just children, just young people. We were just hanging out.
Well, you quoted some, I know you're a fan, a music person. You quoted some artists earlier at dinner. So at the time, I guess in '63, what were the favorite groups that were out? Were you a Beatles fan?
What favorite groups?
Yeah.
You mean
Music.
music?
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to backtrack here and let you know that my brother also wrote and produced music. So what was played at his house was, the things that he wrote and produced,
Right.
and blues.
Blues.
You said that your brother was always trying to get into new things. Why do you think he chose you to go and integrate Martin instead of himself?
He thought he could tell me what to do. He figured no one else would have the nerve, I guess.
You mentioned that the kids in school came to your brother's home. Were you ever invited to their home?
They didn't live here in Pulaski.
Okay. So none of them lived local.
Right, they were not local.
When it came to public facilities like the drugstore and other places where you found it relatively easy to integrate, having this self-confidence, did you find that others in the community, other African Americans in the community, had the same success? You had just had a big win by being able to come here first, and so probably had a boost of confidence by doing that. Did you hear more about others able to go to the drugstore after that, for example?
I did not. I didn't follow up on it, didn't keep up with the newspaper, what was going on. I was too busy doing my thing in Martin.
You mentioned in your one of your choir trips and when you were returning and the bus driver, do you by chance remember his name?
I don't remember it right now, but I know he is in the yearbook, so
Is it James Smith? Was that James Smith his name?
that was.
Okay. That was J.B. Smith's father, and J.B. later became the principal down at Bridgeport Middle School many years after that. But James later became the head of the director of maintenance here for a number of years, and drove the bus for not only the choir but the athletic teams as well. And he had several interesting stories to tell himself.
Well, I saved him from that one trip.
Lena, you've made history. You've obviously made history. Do you recollect, do you remember thinking at the time as a young 20-something-year-old, anything that, did you realize you were making history? I mean, did
No.
you realize what was happening?
No, that's why it didn't bother me. I was not nervous. I didn't know what I was doing.
Was Mr. Paysinger here when you were here?
I don't recall that name.
Okay, I just kind of thought he was here forever.
It's been many, many years, so I'm a lot older than I might look.
Lena, was James Brown, your brother, was he also the proprietor of the funeral home?
Yes,
And was he also at one time a city councilman here?
yes. You might say that, yes, he did, and that would be correct.
I just want to know if you were, how many girls were in your family? 10 children, how many girls?
5 girls. I'm the only member of my family that, finished college, that went to college. Remember what I said earlier, no one, absolutely no one said anything about college to me.
You mentioned that you give a permission to have a documentary made on James. You know what that's about, who's going to be doing it, or some featured in it, anything like that?
Hazel Joyner Smith is going to be doing that. She does documentaries and she does Black Film Festivals. So she knows all the players, who does what.
She is in Nashville.
She is in Nashville.
You know, it will be on PBS or something like that.
We haven't gotten to that point. We only had an all-day meeting last Thursday. So, but she has agreed to do it, so it will be coming.
Having known James and Billy when he came back from the Navy, I was a little boy. I got to know him brother well, and I spent a lot of time as a young man listening to him talk about his vision when he came back here. James, like everybody else, came back out of the army and he came home. James always had a vision about making things much, much better. And James did things that in Tennessee uses political process that no one has ever done before. He went from a young man coming back out of the Navy without a lot of no money like everybody else, but about middle of President Carter's presidency. James was invited along with Avon Williams. Avon was one of the, she indicated one of the very famous civil rights attorneys, not only in Tennessee, but across the country. And James became very good friends. But I don't know how many other people across the United States were invited to come to the White House. But James and Avon were invited. And James is proud as a moment because he kept a picture, as you know, in his office all the time. He and President Carter. Now, we're talking about the time when you didn't find a seat back for participating in affairs like that. So to me, having known him and watched him, been aware of James ranks up as some of the greatest civil rights leaders ever did. He almost formed single-handedly with Avon Williams the Tennessee Voters Council. You probably never heard about that. But they organized, first time in the country, first time, very few since that time, they organized black voters from Memphis to Knoxville to Chattanooga into an organization. It was called the Tennessee Voters Council. James was president of it. That made the difference in Tennessee voting. James Brown was a great man. I'm putting a plug in for that documentary if and when it comes out. Make sure you know about it.
Screen of that, possibly maybe at the market.
So actually I have two questions for you. First one's really easy, the second one's not. The first one, where are you residing now? Are you local?
I live in Nashville.
Nashville, all right. Okay. My second one is, so looking back now retrospectively, what do you make of Martin's acceptance and opening up to you that a lot of other places in the South and even across the country didn't? I mean, what do you think what was it about Martin that allowed them to open arms to you in ways that these other places didn't for other African American people? I guess it was a little harder than
Not so hard. James Brown.
And I was gonna say this in my introductory comments, this is the first time Ms. Prince has told her story. And it's very much long overdue. We were members of the Sesquicentennial Committee, or just approaching its 150th anniversary. And first meeting, introduction to going around the table, and somebody just said, "Oh, Ms. Prince was our first African American student." He was a historian. So I said, well, one, never look into who that person was, and two, we have to get her on campus. She'll be back next year as part of the celebration for the Sesquicentennial, because she was very much an important part of the history of Martin College. But we wanted to get her in soon. It's been too long. It's been since 1965 when you left to come back. We're glad to have her back to tell her story tonight.
Ken, we can't really go without saying that Lena is a very big part of the alumni council as well, so she's back doing everything that she can for Martin College, and we're very proud to have her on nationally. So she will actually be back on campus 3 or 4, 5, 6 times before next year.
And one more thing, before everybody leaves, because there are a lot of students in here who don't know this story. And you'll see the play next year. But Dr. Peters, would you just tell us what happened in, I can't remember, 1988 or 1999? He would like to know that story.
Off the top of my head. History, I sort of lived through, but by not coming up to see it. In the late 80s, of course, Pulaski has a long history with the Ku Klux Klan, obviously. It was formed here, a couple of blocks away. Now, unfortunately, that is Pulaski's legacy to much of the world. They've heard of Pulaski, Tennessee, because of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan was disbanded in 1868, by dates of Bedford Forest, 1868, 1869. And most southern states had some form of a Klan. They went by different names. Unfortunately for Pulaski, one of the 6 founders had college courses in New Greek. So he named it the Ku Klux Circle. They did the case for liberation, and it was catchy. So in 1915, when the Klan was reborn in Stone Mountain, Georgia, the modern Klan in its incarnation. Of course, Pulaski still had a place in the dark heart of Klan members. So from time to time, Pulaski would have to host Klan rallies. In the late 80s, though, it got worse than the Klan. The Klan would come, march around the square in their hundreds, in full costume, and then march down to the law office with a blank flag. If you don't know where it is on Madison, that's not a blank flag. The backside has the 6 men's name listed on it. Mr. Massey, who owned the building, in the late 80s, just turned the plaque around. And I like his comment from the play, Boycott. You can't deny your history, but you can turn your back on it. So he turned the plaque around. But for Pulaski, the situation got much worse for Giles County in general. The Aryan Nation purchased land. The Aryan Nation is a step behind even the Klan. Bought land in Giles County and was going to move their national headquarters here. And working with local police, TBI, the citizens of Pulaski basically boycotted to let the Aryan Nation know they weren't welcome, to let the Klan know they weren't welcome. I was in college at the University of North Alabama at the time in Florence, and it made the news there. Obviously, it made the news all over the nation. The city of Pulaski closed down to let these people know they weren't welcome. They would never be welcome. So they're welcoming to some people, but not welcoming to all. It's the history of Pulaski. And a few years back, our director of theater arts road play, boycott. Some of you may have seen it when it ran for 3 nights 3 or 4 years ago. That will be broadcast again next February. But there will be another production of that next February as it's a, how to explain it in theatrical terms. The play is in the words of the people who participated. A docudrama. So do be looking forward to that.
I just wanted to add there, Ken, that our former mayor, Dan Spear, was a big part of that resistance that you just mentioned in the 80s.
And a number of civic leaders played a key role in that. So going back to August of 1963, Ms. Brown at the time just walked into class at Martin with only the occasional look for the first few days, up through the late 80s. The city of Pulaski, and in 1965, when Giles County Board of Education integrated with that board, at 65, that's 9-10 years after the Brown decision. But this is the South. But when Giles County integrated without a court order, I think the citizens of Pulaski and Giles County have done everything they can in many ways to try to overcome that. But do be looking forward to the play Boycott next February. Okay. With that, we're done. Could we give another round of applause? We happen to need a Martin moment. Dr. Rickman and Dr. Allen and some history folk in the back have the apple for you. Thank you for coming out.